On today's episode of Speak Shame with Dr Connie Kerali.
I have just been told that I was born with HIV, which I've lived with for 13 years without knowing. I wanted people to see that this is not about your diagnosis. This is about your acceptance towards life. And that is what keeps you going. And that is what has kept me going so far.
Hello, remarkable woman. I'm your host, Dr Connie Kerali, medical doctor, life coach, and survivor of sexual violence. And you're listening to Speak Shame, a collection of inspiring conversations with remarkable women who have faced and overcome adversity. By sharing their stories, my hope is that you may find strength, connection, and hope in your own journey, and that shame itself loses its power. So sit back, relax, and don't forget to follow the show. Hello and welcome. Joining me on this week's episode is the phenomenal Doreen Moraa Moracha. Doreen is a Kenyan-based HIV AIDS advocate, a member of the Generation Equality Youth Task Force, 2021 International AIDS Society Young Leader, a member of the Global Collaborative on AIDS, and a blogger with life and love with HIV. She's received 2 awards, the Stigma Warrior Award by the International Stigma Conference and the Adolescents and Young People Award by the National AIDS Control Council. Her YouTube channel and digital advocacy platform entitled I Am a Beautiful Story is based on her life living positively with HIV for 32 years. So welcome, Doreen, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Connie, for being here.
You're more than welcome, more than welcome. And I want to kind of start off this podcast really with asking you a question about your life, but I'm going to do it slightly differently. I want you to tell me, if your life story was turned into a book, describe for me what happens in chapter 1.
So in chapter 1, I'm 13. And I have just been told that I was born with HIV, which I've lived with for 13 years without knowing. And my parents were told a little bit earlier than I was. And now I have just found out about my diagnosis, but it has not phased me per se. Like, it hasn't shocked me that I'm a 13-year-old living with HIV who is born with HIV. All I have is just questions that, do my siblings have HIV as well? So what happened next? And also because of how I had been introduced to HIV earlier, I'm now wondering, what is my quality of life going forward? But also, as a 13-year-old, I'm excited because I get to miss school every month legally because I'm going to hospital. I do not eat the same diet on that particular day with my sibling, so it's giving privilege. Also, my doctor has reassured me that I'm starting new medication, so I'm not going to be as sick as I have been in the first 13 years of my life. Yeah.
Okay, that's a great way of encapsulating the early days of your story. I guess I wanted to know next what your journey has been like and what's led you into this sort of advocacy role that you're in today.
So I didn't start advocacy from advocacy. Like, I didn't wake up and say, I want to be a HIV advocate. I just started sharing my story. And this stemmed from, because for the first 23 years of my life, nobody knew that I had HIV. Rather, the people outside my family did not know that I was living with HIV. So the people who knew were my family members, close family members, and a few external family members that my parents had told. Otherwise, it was just me and my healthcare worker for a good part of the time. So my friends didn't know, my closed people didn't know. Like, it was just me. Let's just say that. So when I was doing internship, because I was interning at a government parastatal that had a wellness unit. So with them, they used to do a lot of advocacy, but wellness, counseling, guiding teachers, because it was a teacher-based parastatal. So they used to really handle a lot of teachers living with HIV or affected with drug and alcohol abuse. So I was just there. And I was not there based on the fact that I'm living with HIV. I was just doing my internship and I wanted to finish this and go work for the United Nations. That was the dream. So as I was there, we go testing one of the one of our outreach programs. So we used to go testing in higher education institutions, and we had spent like half the week there because it was a whole week outreach. But for the first half of the week, the students were not coming to get tested. They were not even coming for counseling or for the free condoms. There was nothing. They were just like the minute they had there's a HIV testing. The minute HIV was mentioned, they were like, we are out. You will see us there. Nah, we're good. So my boss at that time knew that I was living with HIV because my mother was a teacher and she was part of the union that formed the organizations that I used to work for. So my boss then was like, why don't you just start by telling them that you're living with HIV besides the young people like you, so they will understand, like the two of you will you will relate. And I was like, remember when I was first told that I'm HIV positive, I was told to never tell anyone. And the first stigma that I experienced was from my own relatives. So now here I am, and my boss is telling me, tell people that you're living in HIV. And I'm like, they're strangers, because the people that I was supposed to be my support system ended up not behaving like a support system. Obviously, she's my boss, so there's no way I was going to say no. So I said, yeah, I will think that is a great idea. I will definitely think about that. So we continue testing. Some of the young people kind of come, some, I think for a better part, we also went to them in their own lecture rooms and we were like, hey, just come and get tested. And you don't even have to get tested. You can just get free condoms. Like, a win is a win. So they came, some of them tested, some of them like, if I go with you, then I'll test. So some of them, like, I had to convince them. Some of them were like, no, what if I test with you? And if I had agreed to that I would have ended up getting out of that place with over 15 tests. So I just told them I can't test more than once and I already know my status. So, but it was an encouraging way that there was that kind of peer-to-peer support of HIV testing. And so that is when my boss was like, now, we need now to do it like a little bit large scale, share it with the other, with our members and all that. And I was like, yeah, I wouldn't mind. So I really did try to write my story and give it to her, but it was just not making sense because I had never relived my own life experience as a person living with HIV. And after I was just told you're HIV positive, take your medication, then the excitement wore off. And then at one point, I stopped taking my medication. So at that point, I was not really vibing with this whole thing of living with HIV. So when telling it to tell other people, while I myself don't really look at myself from that point of view of it's a nice thing that life continues regardless, it really didn't work for me. But I tried. I wrote that story like 4 or 5 times, and then I just threw away those papers, and I was like, nah, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
So the same year, like a few months after that, I was reading a magazine just in the office, and I see this lady, and she was doing some work with girls in one of the informal settlements we have. I was like, oh, maybe I should just write to this editor and tell her. It's like writing to an anonymous bestie, and they're like, hi. So I also have HIV and all that. So actually, at the back of my mind, I knew she was not going to reply. But that was the motivation behind me writing. So then I reach home and I find her email, and she's like, hi, Doreen, I just read your story and it's so beautiful and I want you to share it with us and our readers will really love it. And I was shocked because the thing is, my story is not just mine. It ties in my mom, my dad, and my siblings. So I can't just go and say, hey, so now I'm living with HIV. It means I've disclosed other people's HIV status without their consent. So I had to call my parents. My dad was not okay with it because my dad did not have HIV. My mom has HIV. So they were a discordant couple in their whole marriage life. So now here we are. Now I have to disclose the status because it's not just me telling my story. If it was just me, I'll just say, hey, I'm HIV positive. But no, there is other
Yeah.
people involved. So I tell them, my mom is like, yeah, fine, you go ahead and tell the story. My dad is very against it because also by just virtue of being married to a woman living with HIV and having children who are born with HIV, he also received his own share of stigma, which was always unfair for him. And he really tried getting, because obviously HIV, as it has progressed over the years, the stigma has also been
Mhm.
there. Yes. So he was very hesitant the first few years of my sharing my story, and he really never liked it. Uh, he just came to be in acceptance of it from 2020. That is when now he was like, yeah, I
Yeah.
it's fine. But before that, he was always very hesitant. He was just always like, why do you have to do these interviews? Why do you have to tell these people? And the thing is, when I looked back, I did get where he was coming from because some people were always very mean about it. To even
Mm.
in my comment sections, when I now started sharing about it on social media, people were always very mean about it. So it really did make sense on his concerns because they were very valid.
Thank you for sharing that journey and the twists and the turns. And it really, I think, is helpful for listeners and viewers to kind of understand it's not necessarily just this sort of straight line to, oh, I've got this diagnosis and now I'm doing advocacy and that's it. There are kind of challenges and things along the way. And I think you've just told that beautifully. So thank you. And there's a few things I picked up on. And the first thing really, actually, you mentioned quite early on in that, for several years, it was just a very close network of people that knew.
Yeah.
How was that for you? Because obviously from the age of 13 until you kind of disclosed to other people, what was that like having that secret, your friends not knowing, going to school and that sort of thing? How did you find that?
To be honest, I didn't find it hectic in the
Mhm,
first few
mhm,
years, especially in high school, because again, high school is just high school.
mhm,
So I just was not ready to, and I actually thank God that I did not. None of the people I went to high school with knew that I was HIV positive because it would have really given me a very bad experience. And I know that
mm,
people would be like, "But you wouldn't know," but they didn't know, and sometimes they will treat me badly. So imagine if they knew that there is actually a reason to treat me badly. So for high school, really just thank God that yeah, nobody knew about it. But now, after I finished high school, is when now I started realizing because, well, our old education system, you used to have like a whole leap year that you do nothing before you join higher education. So that year kind of gave me the perception on how people talk about HIV, how people
mm,
perceive HIV, how the world just looks at HIV from this point of very contagious people that are not supposed to be part of society. And then it made me realize that my parents had actually shielded me from a lot of stigma growing up that I didn't get. Even the ones that I had experienced when I just explained to them that this is happening, they would, because we moved a lot. So we just wake up and move. And I would wonder, why did we leave? But I
yeah,
never knew up until now when I grew up and I now understood from my own point of view that they were trying so much for other people not to project their own personal bias to
mhm,
me before I understood fully the diagnosis that I am hosting HIV, I am on ARVs for the rest of my life, and there is nothing wrong with that. The problem is,
mhm,
well, with people and their personal bias, they will always feel like, no, there is
mm,
something wrong with that. Or you cannot just be living your life as a person because you're HIV positive. So they protected me a lot. But now when I kind of got the vibe, or rather the how society views HIV, that's also what led me to now be very I can't say obsessed, but I really wanted to find a HIV cure.
mm,
Now I was searching, I was on the internet, I was Googling stuff. And then one time on TV, some guy came out from one of our neighboring countries here in East Africa. And he said that can cure every disease. So I convinced my mother that let's go there and take that herbal medication because he cures everything. And we went, and that's how we ended up. I ended up stopping my medication for 2 years, and my mom stopped her
Mhm.
medication for just 3 months and went back.
Mhm.
So for me, that was like the height of denial of
Mhm.
it. People don't like this thing. I have to find a solution of getting away from it so that people can like Doreen and note the diagnosis that she has. And so that,
Mhm.
like, I think 2 years after that was like the whole of that 2 years that I was not on treatment. My viral load was going up. My doctors were wondering what is happening. And I was insisting that I'm taking medication. But to them, they didn't know that now I realized what it means to be HIV positive. Now it's not about the cool meals I eat after the clinics. It's not about the skipping of school every month. Now it's actually the reality that this is exactly how people view people living with HIV. And it is you to present another picture of HIV to them, then they will accept you. Otherwise, they will have that personal bias for a very long time.
That's so interesting, and I completely understand that real denial and that wanting for there to be something, so that that feeling of acceptance and liking. And you mentioned that was over 2 years of that where you were off the medications. What
Mm.
was the turning point for you that led you back onto the ARVs?
Well, I became sick. It's not that I was voluntarily that I decided, let me go back. No, it was because I became sick. I had an opportunistic infection. My mouth was very swollen. I could not eat. So my mom was like, no, 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 we have to go to hospital.
Mm.
So we went, and well, my viral load was now like over 150,000 copies. And now the doctors are like, yeah, you have not been taking medication. And I'm like, yes, I stopped them. And they're like, why? So I didn't tell them that I tried to seek for a cure. I just told them that that I was just tired and I needed a treatment holiday. And we just, he was like, I thought they told you this treatment is for life. And I was like, just because somebody tells you that treatment is for life does not mean that you are ready for that life. Besides, I've
Mm.
already been doing this for 5 years and I was already tired. So hey, no. So I had now to be taken back to treat the opportunistic infections, then back again to the ARVs themselves. And now after that, the main reason was because I was just in so much pain, and I did not want the pain. I didn't like the pain, and it also reminded me of the part before I started treatment, where there was always one opportunistic infection or another, and I didn't
Mm.
like that part. So I went back. I will take the medication when I feel like. I will stop when I don't feel like. Like it was just a very inconsistent point of my life. So I will just take them when I feel like. When I don't feel like it, I will be like, today we'll try again tomorrow. Up until I think now after the time when I was I had I don't I think the sharing of my story on mainstream media probably was the beginning of, if I am going to show people that you can live a normal healthy life with HIV, I also have to lead that kind of life practically.
Mm. Yeah.
So I started now taking my ARVs a little bit seriously. I started telling people that you can live your life because I've lived my life. That time it was 24 years. So I was like, I've lived my life for 24 years and here I am. And I lost a brother because we didn't have ARVs. Now we have ARVs.
Mm.
So there's no reason for you to actually let HIV progress into AIDS and eventually take your life when we have medication that can manage this particular virus. And with that, I think I healed and accepted myself the more I shared
Mm.
the story, and it
Yeah.
just kind of fell into place.
Yeah, yeah. And do you know what? I think you hit the nail on the head there with that word acceptance, self-acceptance, because I think when you talked about going back on the medications because you were sick, I was thinking to myself, okay, and what about that sort of self-acceptance
Right?
journey as well? And so really you say you found sharing your story was part of, I guess, a healing process then. Yeah. Okay, okay. One of the things that caught my attention when I found your YouTube channel was a video, a couple of videos actually you made about dating with HIV. Talk to me a little bit about how your dating experience has been.
In this later years. I don't know what is happening, but in the earlier years, well, when I used to share my story about living with HIV, no, before I shared my story about living with HIV, a lot of sometimes I do get questions that, so did you tell people you dated before coming out publicly that you were HIV positive? And I did. It's just that I did not say it from a point of, hey, I'm HIV positive. Like, let's get this out of the way. No, it was on more of a pity party kind of situation. So I'll tell somebody, hey, by the way, I have HIV. I just wanted to let you know. That part where it's more of manipulative. So this person won't leave you because they have just found out that you have this virus and now they have to feel bad for you. So, and that's what I usually say, that before getting into dating as a person living with HIV, learn how to accept your status, because sometimes that relationship might end and it will have nothing to do with HIV and you will still blame the diagnosis for it if you have noted. So I will tell somebody, because I remember there's a time I was left on a first date. I did disclose. It's just that the person did not believe in me, because there's this whole belief that a person living with HIV must have a specific look. So they were like, no, you don't look like you have HIV. And I was like, okay, then let's go get tested. So our first date was a HIV testing date. And well, we ate fast. And
Good, good.
we proceeded to the clinic and we're like, we don't want counseling. We just want the test. And we were tested. Obviously, mine came out positive. He came out negative. And now that drive towards towards home was very quiet. So I didn't even know what to say, because now how do you unpack that later? Because I don't think we had put that into consideration. So he left me just somewhere and was like, I'll talk to you later. I need to do some things in the office, but I will talk to you. So they left. There is somebody I did disclose to, and they were like, "Oh my God, that is so awesome. That is so powerful, and I really just love your honesty about this whole thing." And I was shocked because it's not the reaction I was hoping for. I was hoping for getting ghosted, just them all of a sudden becoming busy. But no, all of a sudden, this person was very accepting. But then again, I realized that they had a history of HIV in their family. So you see, somebody like that, because the thing about HIV is if you're not infected, you are affected. So for this person, they were affected with HIV. So they knew, they understood the whole thing, and they were like, yeah, it's not a big deal. There's another one that I disclosed to, and they were very much okay with my diagnosis at first. And they were like, so what is it like dating as a person living with HIV? What do I need to do? Do I need to go for PrEP? Do I? And I was like, no, 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 it depends. If you are comfortable with PrEP, it's fine. But as long as I'm taking my medication, I cannot infect you with HIV. And besides, now with the U equals U coming in, and we also have condoms. So it's not like that. And also, there's usually a very huge misconception that people living with HIV are always sick, that we are always bedridden, or we have one infection or another. Like, there's that misconception. So I also had to help him and learn that the reason why that used to happen is because there was no treatment. So opportunistic infections would come at you any point. Now we have medication. So if something is wrong, you feel it, you seek healthcare professional, because you know that I'm taking my medication well, so things are supposed to be okay. Well, unfortunately, they invited me over to a sleepover after a couple of dates, and then they were like, nah. Like, literally, it was a very weird interaction, because I was seated on one end of the sofa, he was seated on the other end of the sofa. In the bed, there was like a very huge distance between the two of us. So I was wondering what is going on. And then later on, it was like, oh, you're such an amazing person. But you see, I don't think I am ready for this and all that. And I was like, you know what? Fine. It's okay. So, and that's why I say that when you are ready to date, you also need to be have been at a point of acceptance that it does not bother you. If the relationship goes sideways, you're good with that. If it
Yeah.
does not, if it somebody will accept it today, they go listen to their friends who are very misinformed, and then they come back and they're like, I don't know how I feel about this. So you always have to be very open-minded, and that only happens when you have accepted your status.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wise words there. I like that. It's good for all the listeners to hear. I think, and that probably translates across to so many things as well. Self-acceptance is key. And I think then probably the linking on to that, how do you feel that your journey has connected you with others who faced similar challenges?
So I think when I need to go back a little bit to when I
Mhm.
first started sharing my story. So when I did the newspaper interview, and they said they were at first it was supposed to go on print, and then they said no, we'll just put it on our digital site, and then yeah. So that time the digital media was not as big as it is now. So I said fine, it's still fine. So they shared it there, and then they shared it on the Facebook page. Then my email was at the very end. So people started writing me emails. Lots of emails. In fact, I don't even know why I left my email. That has been because I've never really understood why I accepted to my email being part of that thing. So now I have 1,000 plus emails of
Wow.
people sharing their lived experiences, their journeys, telling me they were the only person I've ever disclosed to. And now I was overwhelmed. I never even got to reply to all of them because there were so many. And I had to read through so many of them. That's actually how now I ended up now going the social media way, because I realized that there is a lack of a community in when it comes to living with HIV, because this is a lifelong health condition. And it's also a lifelong health condition that is very stigmatized. So the probability of getting a community is so rare because it's a very hush thing. So it's just you and yourself and your healthcare provider. So if you don't have that support system, if you don't know, we hear the numbers that there are 39 million people globally living with HIV. But sometimes you don't know who they are, even though they are very close people to us. Sometimes you're like, you do not know who those people are. So I decided, you know what, even though there are all these millions of people globally living with HIV, I'm going to be the visible one. So they see me, they interact with me, they associate their journeys with me. It might not be the same journey. We might not have gotten HIV the same way, but we still have the same health condition. And so, to a point that the more I do advocacy, the more I stopped even saying I was born with HIV, because I realized the tag of born with HIV comes with a lot of pity and, oh, it was not your fault. Oh, you
Mm.
did it publicly and very loudly because you were born with it, so you didn't do anything to get it. But nobody wakes up in the morning and plans that, get ready with me, I am going to get HIV today. Nobody does it. You see? So it's kind of saying, because I used to get this word so much, that you were innocent. So does it mean that the
Mm.
other people were guilty of some sort of way? So that's how they ended up HIV positive. So because of that, I kind of started saying, I am HIV positive, because we all have the same virus. It doesn't matter how you got it, we all have the same virus. So that also to integrate the other people who did not get HIV from other means, that people who inject drugs and other people who got it sexually, to be not aligned per se, but I'm looking for this English word, to relate to my own lived experience.
Mm.
We are only living with HIV, and there is nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Like that was exactly what I'm trying to reach out. And for the people who do not have HIV, to stay HIV negative. Because at the end of the day, crossing over to the HIV positive side is a very easy thing when you don't have it. But now managing it and living with it, and the regret that comes with it for other people, because not all of us are Doreens and we are going to be, I'm HIV positive, there's nothing wrong with that. Some people are still struggling with acceptance. Some people are in denial. Some people have, we've seen them have suicidal thoughts. Some people get mental health,
Mm.
all because of one diagnosis. So I over the years, the reason why I share my story and specifically use videos and photos, it's to show people that there is a fix. Because I would have social media, I would have decided to be faceless and say I'm HIV positive. And it still would have made sense. But I wanted people to see that this is not about your diagnosis. This is about your acceptance towards life. And that is what keeps you going. And that is what has kept me going so far.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I think that when you mention the word community, I think that just encapsulates it all, because it's so important for people to realize that they're not alone. And I imagine even within your social media channels, people are interacting with one another as well. So it's great for them to have this sort of shared space. What would you say? Because you talked a little bit about how sometimes it affects people's mental health and so on and so forth. What advice would you give someone who feels stuck in a similar situation, who
Mhm.
maybe just hasn't reached the point where they can talk about it to other people? They feel very alone. What would you say to them?
So first of all, acceptance is a journey. Indeed. Sometimes you will see very strange comments from people in society, and you will wonder why and how we are still here in 2024. And sometimes it will demoralize you, and you'll be like, wow, this should not be how life is. But unfortunately, it is. So part of acceptance is also accepting that there's some people in society who will never change their view on HIV, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So it's more of just learning and unlearning and relearning. Because as a person, especially if you got diagnosed with HIV later in life, you already had a personal bias about HIV. It might be very subconscious, but you did have a personal bias about HIV. So when you find yourself there, that personal bias kind of comes out very heavily, because now that is where denial kicks in. So you don't kick yourself down because now here you are. No, you now learn to accept yourself. And if you have to seek professional help, please do. There's nothing wrong with going for counseling. There's nothing wrong with going for therapy just because you received a HIV diagnosis. Your life does not end there. That is one thing that I think we need a lot of time to unlearn, that part that once you are HIV positive, your life is over. Because, well, it used to be like that. But now we have treatment. Now HIV is very manageable, and you can live your very best full life with it. The only issue comes in with how you handle the diagnosis. So don't handle it like something you need to win over. No. You just take your medication and you learn every single day to accept your HIV status. Some days you won't even remember you have HIV. Some days it will weigh very heavily on you. Both days, do not blame yourself. It's just the balance of life. So I also try and find a community. I know that along the way, we've lost the sense of community, especially because, like, from the Kenyan perspective, we used to have a lot of psychosocial support groups, but nowadays they're really, really not been as strong as they used to be. So, but there are small communities that still exist amongst us. So find them. Even if it's just somebody on social media sharing their story, because nowadays there's so many people sharing their stories with HIV on social media, just to show you that there is more than one person. That is, there is more than living with HIV, and they are doing this thing called life very unapologetically and very shamelessly about it. Also, you must be shameless. You actually must.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of shame attached to living with HIV. And that specifically comes from the sexual way of getting HIV. So people will try to shame you on, oh, you got HIV through sex, so you were with multiple sexual partners. So just you have to learn to be shameless. That one you have to learn, because there will always be people who will try to shame you because of that. And there is nothing wrong with you living with HIV. Besides, some of the people shaming you don't even know their HIV diagnosis. So sometimes you just have to accept, and also start taking your ARVs, because there is no magic bullet to living with HIV. It's just taking your ARVs. And I know some people are worried about what will people say. But the thing about people is they will always have something to say.
Okay.
If
Yeah.
you don't start a treatment, they will have something to say. If you start a treatment, they will have something to say.
Mhm.
If you let your HIV progress into AIDS and eventually it kills you, they will come and still judge you and say, "Why did you not start treatment?" So you see, people will always have something to say. So stop minding about people. It's your life. You are the host of HIV. You make the rules. You do not give HIV the power.
Wise words from Doreen there, people. That's great. The way you've summarized that. I think just for people that maybe are listening to this and don't know much about HIV, can you just quickly explain what ARVs are and also what U equals U means for the people that don't know?
So ARVs are antiretroviral. They are the medication that we take to manage the the HIV virus. And they basically just suppress your virus to levels that we call undetectable. So the virus is not producing any new copies in the body. And that way, when you reach undetectable, you cannot transmit HIV to anyone in a sexual manner. And for women living with HIV, it also is more of a help or a boost towards giving birth to HIV negative children. However, there is a whole process with that. And with U equals U, it's determined through a viral load test that is done at least once yearly in a facility. And so you don't declare yourself undetectable. A viral load test does that. It says the doctor will tell you you are undetectable, continue taking your medication. What else? Or you can live with people normally as a person living with HIV. You can't transmit HIV through handshakes, through hugs, through sharing of utensils. Those are not ways of getting HIV. So we need to learn to be a little bit kinder, hug our people living with HIV because they need those hugs. And yeah, besides, as the person living with HIV, your ARVs are your lifeline. Don't play with them. I played with mine and they almost lost me. So don't play with the medication. And also just, it's not always going to be rainbows and tiaras and positivity, but they're always but life will always be there. Life will still life. It doesn't mean that you take it out on your HIV diagnosis.
Thank you for that. Because I think, any opportunity as well to provide education for people who don't know that much about HIV, I think it's really great sort of listening to you and not just your lived experience as well, but getting that education as well and understanding. And the other thing I want to know is, what do you hope that listeners will take away from hearing your story?
So I hope that, especially for the people who don't have HIV, to learn how to prevent themselves from getting HIV. Because at the end of the day, new HIV infections are still happening as of 2024. So to learn that HIV is also very preventable in 2024, we have condoms, we have abstinence, we have being faithful to one partner. We have PrEP now the biomedical ways. We have PrEP, which is pre-exposure prophylaxis that prevents one from getting HIV. It's now evolved into an injectable version as well. So we have both the oral medication and the injectable medication. We have post-exposure prophylaxis that you take in case you have had a HIV exposure, take it within 72 hours and for 28 days, because the 28-day dose. We also now have better medication coming up, such as better prevention methods rather coming up. Some of them are very women-centered, especially the PrEP ring, that is a ring inserted vaginally to prevent HIV during vaginal sex. So it's actually one of the game changers because it gives women a lot of agency to prevent themselves from getting HIV. What else the others, I can't mention them because they're still in the pipeline. Yeah. But these are the ones that I've mentioned are the ones that we currently have right now that we can use. And for you to remember, for you, the listener, I want you to remember that HIV is very preventable in 2024. So prevent, prevent, prevent. And for the ones that are living with HIV, take your ARVs. It's basically that I know it's easier said than done because I've been on ARVs for 19 years. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, it's hectic, but they're literally the only ones. There's nothing else. There's no shortcut. We don't have a cure yet, but there are cure strategies currently being researched on. So as we wait for the cure, can we at least take our ARVs and live our best lives? Because life is beautiful. You just have to embrace the beauty in it.
Yeah, yeah, and thank you for that. And I actually want to know as well what you would say to your younger self, seeing where you are now and everything that you're doing for the HIV community to educate people who don't have HIV. If you were to look back at your younger self,
So,
seeing this journey, what would you tell your younger self now?
well, I'll say that's something that I always say, two things. Dear younger Doreen Moracha, you are a beautiful story and you are greater than HIV every day.
Yes, yes, yes to that. I think that's so beautiful. Thank you so much. And as we come to the end of this podcast, I'm not going to give your email address out because you've experienced that before. You don't want the thousands of emails coming your way. But if people want to connect with you, follow your story, where's the best place for them to go?
So on my social media, YouTube, Doreen Moraa Moracha, or I Am a Beautiful Story, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I have a very problematic name, and it's for a reason. My name on those three platforms is Yes, I Have HIV. And then on LinkedIn is Doreen Moracha. On Facebook is Doreen Moraa Moracha.
Put all of that into the show notes, so don't feel like you're having to write things down if you're listening. And the final thing, actually, I wanted to ask you is if you had to name one remarkable woman who's inspired you, who would it be and why?
If I was to name one remarkable woman, um, it will have to be a lady called Asunta Wagura, because she's one of the ladies that came out publicly when HIV was at its height. Matter of fact, when we literally had AIDS killing people every single day. And she came out where we had zero treatment. That it was just HIV testing and vibes. And she said her story as a person living with HIV. So it's the very first woman in Kenya to come out publicly and say, hey, I am HIV positive. And people were shocked because, first of all, it was killing people, yes, but it was a very harsh, silent thing. Like we know somebody died of AIDS, but we don't know, we don't want to talk publicly about it. And she broke that stigma that people had, that harshness that people had, and it gave her so much power and strength to just speak against this. And also kind of took away the power away from the virus, because I think for a very long time we've given HIV so much power, and the more power we give HIV, the more problematic it becomes, and that's why 40 years later we still have so much stigma around HIV. And imagine if we took away the power and we just saw it as a normal health condition, people
Yes.
would not have what we have. But now the stigma fuels so many bad things behind HIV, and sometimes I wish we would just let the stigma go and change something around it. So Asunta is one of the ladies that I usually just admire, and the story and how they just came out publicly and said, no, I'm not going to be shamed about this thing. And I'm going to say that I'm living with HIV. And she's thriving and living with HIV today.
Amazing. Just say her name once again, Asunta
Asunta Wagura.
Wagura. Okay, let's remember that name and thank you to her.
Yeah.
Thank you to you, Doreen. I really appreciate you coming here today and sharing your story. I know that it will have such a huge impact on the lives of so many people. So really grateful for that. Is there anything else you feel like you want to share before we come to an end?
No, I feel like I have said enough for
Well,
today.
thank you for today. There could be a part two. People watch this space. Thank you so much, Doreen. And to the listeners, I will make sure I put all of Doreen's contacts in the show notes so that you can continue to follow her beautiful story. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Speak Shame with Dr. Connie Kerali. And thank you so much to Doreen Moraa Moracha for being my guest on this week's show. Please take a look at the show notes for information on Doreen's social media handles if you'd like to connect with her. If you'd like to join the community, head over to @Dr Connie Kerali or @SpeakShame on Instagram, or join the private group Speak Shame with Dr Connie Kerali on Facebook. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to get a new episode every other Thursday. Until next time, take care.